Morning everybody. We're going to be looking this morning at this passage from Romans 12, and as always, although Paul goes into the most amazing theological teaching, he always comes out in the end with a very practical, and this is such an example. Just to reflect on the end of the last chapter, Paul is saying, who can search the mind of God? Who can even fathom his wonders? Who can be his counselor? Who can pay him back for the wonders that he has done in us? And so when he begins this, our new chapter, he then moves on and he says, I urge you then, and actually the word he uses is brothers, but that it is literally womb brothers, brothers of the womb. We are born of God, and brothers and sisters, we are womb brothers and sisters. And he says, because of all of this, because of the unfathomable goodness of God, we then do this. And he says, I urge you, therefore, womb brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice. And this was extremely strange talk to the Greeks, who believed that the spirit was the only thing, and bodies were just a sort of shell, and they really didn't matter. Paul is saying, no, it's body, mind, and spirit, and we are called as part of our worship, part of our thankfulness to God, we're called to make our bodies living sacrifices. I don't know about you, but I have often thought a great deal about sacrifices in the Old Testament. And at one level, it's pretty straightforward. God told them to do sacrifices, and if you look back in Leviticus, for example, you will find masses of detail as to how it was to be done. But what prompted me to think about it very deeply is that so often David makes it absolutely clear that God isn't really interested in the actual sacrifices. What God is interested in is the heart attitude behind the sacrifices. And so we bring him our very best. We bring him our first. We never give him second best and say, oh, that will do. And I'm sorry, because the sun is starting to come in, and just shut the blinds. More about the noises in a moment. He says, let's bring him our very best. And just to point out some of the things that David says at various places, in Psalm 141, David says, may the lifting of my hands be as an evening sacrifice. David was ahead of his time. He was beginning to say, it's what comes out of here that God desires. And of course, in another place, he said, Psalm 51, God doesn't delight in sacrifice, in burnt offerings. What delights God is the broken spirit and the contrite heart. He says, who may ascend the hill of the Lord? Will it be the one who has made all the sacrifices? No, it says he who has clean hands and the purified heart. So in a sense, it's difficult to understand why it was so important, but it was, and it's more connected with the heart attitude of those who brought the sacrifice than the actual sacrifices. God said, I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. Why would I ask you to give me a cow, a bull, or whatever? I own them. It's all mine. So that's the starting point for this, where Paul says, it's all God's. What can we do? Well, we can make our bodies living sacrifices. We can literally come to God and be a sacrifice in everything we do. And he says, you know, don't be conformed to this world. Don't just think, oh, this is the way to live life. This will do. God won't mind. He says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Start thinking God's ways. Live God's holy life. And he says, don't think more highly of yourself than you should. It's all grace. And you know, it's so basic, but it is so important in the life of the church to understand that actually we all function according to the grace that is given to us. Paul then continues by talking about how the church is built and how we're different. There are different gifts, he says. He says, let us each exercise them according to the grace given. If it's prophecy, prophesy. If it's serving, if it's service, serving, and so on. He rules out no one at all. He says every part of this holy sacrifice, this living temple, is going to be ordained by God, and we're never to say, you know, this man is up here, rather like the two Ronnies. Remember that brilliant sketch? He's up here and I'm just down here. Paul says, no, it's not like that. And as I said before, David was ahead of his time, and he had that sense that what really mattered was that people gathered together in this common purpose of worshipping God. Oh, I would love to have been with David and seen him at worship. I think we would have learned a few things. So the second part of this, because it does fall into two parts, is actually about how the church is built. And I've been caused to think in the last week or two about this, because some of you will know we have a building site right opposite our house. They're building 70-something houses, and for the last months they haven't built any houses, but they have ripped the site to pieces. They've laid drains, they've put up roads, and I've just been reflecting as I was prepping for this sermon today how that building site is so much like the church. You know, there are people there who are sitting in their big diggers, and they are able to shift soil and make piles, and then there are people in dumper trucks driving along carrying the soil, and there are people who come along and they have specialisms and they put the pipes in and they connect up the gas, and if you listen, they've just finished their morning break and it's just cranking up now with beeping and all the noises that go with a building site. But you know, there occasionally a little man comes out in his high-vis suit and his helmet, and he sets up somewhere high on the site, he sets up an antenna, and this connects the site to global positioning. And using satellite navigation, he can exactly pinpoint what should be where on the building site. And I thought, this is familiar. Everything is worked out by global positioning. Even, I'm told, even the actual excavators have a screen so they know exactly where they're digging. It's not like the old days where a man would go along and knock in a peg and get out his measure, which would measure not in feet or yards but in chains, you know, and no, it's all gone. But you know, on this site there are all sorts of people working. As I say, there's the big digger drivers, and there's the dump truck drivers, and then there's a man who drives the sweeper and he sweeps up all the mess, and then there's various people who are on foot doing various jobs, and you hear them swinging hammers and sledgehammers and doing all sorts of things in deep holes in the ground. But there is one man who has the biggest job, and he has a very big drill, and his job is to drill down 5 meters deep to put concrete piles where all the houses will go. And I think this man probably wanted secretly to be a dentist, and he has the most annoying machine because it whines hands all day long as he drills the holes and the concrete is poured, and it is overwhelmingly annoying, but it's a necessary part of building the houses, because the sand that we live on here is not a good basis for building a house. And you know, I've been thinking as I was prepping how like the church this is, that there are all these people and they're all doing very different jobs. Actually, you couldn't do without one of them. They're all crucial. Even the man who sweeps up and cleans up, and probably the man who makes the tea in their mess hut, certainly the man who empties their lavies. He comes every week with the honey cart and empties them. You know, everyone has a crucial part. Without the individuals, everything would stop. And it's like that in the church, you know, and it's so important just to, when Paul says, you know, look at yourself reasonably with sober judgment, that works both ways. That doesn't just mean don't be big-headed, it means also value yourself as God values you, because that's important as well, to know that whatever you're doing in the church, whatever your calling is, you are called by God, and your worship is how you do it. That's what it means when Paul says, right at the beginning, he says, this sacrifice acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. That word actually does literally mean your work, your workaday work. It literally means, so if you're a if you're a builder or an accountant or a nurse or a teacher or whatever it is that you do, we do it to God. We don't just come along on Sunday and have a bit of worship and then say, I've worshipped for the week. No, actually, our entire life is to be a living sacrifice to God, where we're always honouring him in all that we do. It's quite a transforming thought to get this right. But the other thing that strikes me about our building site over the road, which is ominously quiet right at the moment, they start at 7 in the morning, is that actually it's a very messy place. It's a very noisy place. It's not always a pleasant place to be. You can see the shape coming along. You can see the roads with the curbs and the drains, and you can see pipes sticking out of the ground. It's taking shape. It's going to take time. They say it'll be another year before it's finished. But it's not always a great place to be. And actually, if you'd heard the cheer that went up when it rained last week, because these guys were working in the great heat right through that spell of extremely hot weather. And there was a cheer on the site when the first heavy raindrops fell. Hannah heard it. So, yeah, you know, the church, it's going places, it's taking shape. We have what you might call, you know, satellite navigation. Do we not believe that the Lord guides us in all that we do? From above, he positions us accurately. He doesn't make mistakes, but it will be a noisy and a messy place at times. And it's so easy when it gets messy and noisy just to think, oh, I've had enough of this. But no, actually, that's church. But underneath it all rises up to God this wonderful sacrifice of praise, because it is all about him, as we allow our hearts and our minds to be renewed and we see it with God's perspective. So, dear ones, God bless you with that. I'm going to take a break from preaching for a while. Just feel that's what God's saying. And I'm going to be praying about what's next. So I may not see you for a while, but we send our love to you. God bless you all, and may he shine upon you and make you to shine in his kingdom. Amen.